Morning.
Good morning.
Happy Friday. My name's Jacqueline Chauser, and I'll be running our workshop today on rubrics. I do have Hugo and Stella kind of co-piloting with me, so if you have any questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat. Also, I like to let everyone know that I like to run very collaborative workshops. So if you have questions, please feel free to open your mic and ask. I basically keep a checklist of things that I like to make sure I cover. But I find that when I allow faculty to kind of be a part of the workshop and ask questions, like we get to it all eventually. So, you know, don't be shy. That's just my style. So if something, you know, comes up, you know, or you have a specific question, if I can't answer it during the time we have, then you're welcome to schedule a meeting. So I'm going to just jump over to this screen for a second while I kind of go over, you know, just another point or two as far as like the way that I run my workshops. Feel free to jot down my contact information because you might have a specific question, or you might find after watching this workshop that you really want to use this tool, but you could use some like more support in how to set up your rubric, because it's actually a very intricate tool that allows for a lot of customization, and it's a very personal tool depending on the way that you want to evaluate your students. So I think Stella or Hugo could also probably pop my email address in the chat room as well. But that's how you can get in touch with me if there's some question that you have, or if you just feel like, oh, wow, I really want to talk to her some more and have like an hour of her time to just help me get my rubric set up. Even though the semester is starting on Monday, yay or yikes, depending on how you feel about it. I can still help you get rubrics set up and connected to your assignments. It's not too late. So as far as our workshop objectives, these are really the things that I want to try to address with regards to why you would want to use a rubric, because setting them up can be a bit of work, but as long as you use an approach that I call a course master, your rubrics don't go away. You won't lose your work as long as you're good about, like, once you create a course, that you work with our team to get a copy of it and set it up, you know, so that you can keep copying it and using it semester after semester. So it's worth the time and energy that you put into thinking about your style of evaluation, especially if you're teaching fully asynchronous distance education courses. So I want to help you improve, you know, student performance in these distance education settings by creating clear, objective requirements for grading and evaluation. We don't have a lot of space for ambiguity in an asynchronous format. And I like to try to help faculty minimize the amount of what I call like course support or tech support that they end up doing with students that don't understand, you know, what you're asking of them, or, you know, frustration that they might feel around the way that you're evaluating them in their work, because you're not able to give them that easy back and forth feedback that you normally would in a classroom setting. So that's one of the big things. And I want to help you improve your grading workflow and the quality of your quantitative and qualitative feedback. The Rubric tool does allow for this. And so I'll kind of talk through how it does and show you how it does. And then most importantly to me, I want you to enhance your communication and your relationships with your students, because grading is, let's face it, it's a sore spot. If a student doesn't feel like they've been graded fairly, or they don't feel like the expectations were clearly set for them in the beginning, you know, they might feel like a grade could be punitive, or that it could be biased in some way. So I find that with this tool, if you use this particular approach and you just set out your expectations in a very clear way, and then you grade based on those expectations, and you're very consistent, a lot of the upset that students sometimes might express about the way that you grade, you know, it minimizes it. So I'm sorry, Hugo. I've tried to tell you to start recording. In any event, so these are the objectives that I would like to help accomplish through this rubric tool. And in terms of how I want to do it, I want to discuss the importance of what I refer to as boilerplate instructions and how they're going to tie into the rubrics that you develop. And then how to set up a mirrored rubric, which is really going to, again, tie into what you're telling the students that your expectations are with the assignment. I'll show you how to customize a rubric so that you can set it up the way that you want to grade. And then I'll show you briefly how you're going to grade a student's assignment with a rubric tool embedded in that assignment. So I'll pause briefly and check. Hugo, did you start recording?
Oh, we've been recording.
Yeah,
Don't worry. Keep going.
Oh,
You're
fantastic.
doing well.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to pause briefly and see, does anyone have any questions before I dive into the demo environment? Okay. So let me, I'm sorry, I should have logged out and logged into my faculty course. 1 second. Alrighty, so here we are in our friendly Rubrics demo course. So with regards to kind of the first point that I wanted to touch on is that transparency and objective, clear instructions on setting expectations for students. I like to create my rubrics and actually put them, like I paste them here in my getting started section of my course. This is basically the living syllabus. So yes, I have a link with the syllabus, but in reality, what do we use a syllabus for? We print it out or we keep a copy of it as students so that we can constantly refer back to criteria and expectations, because as a student, what do we want? We want to get the best grade possible, and we want to understand what it is that our faculty members are expecting of us in order to get that grade. So I have, course calendars and information about the instructor and where you can get into the classroom to log in for synchronous sessions and stuff like that. But I also like to include a course rubric page. And what I do is I actually build out my rubric and take a picture of it and just paste it onto this page so that the students have an opportunity to review exactly how I'm going to score them. You can title your rows and your headers any way you want. It just depends on how you want to score them and what your criteria is for that particular assignment. So for me, I just like to, phrase things like a question. And depending on what is important to me with their performance on a particular type of assignment, you can set up rubrics for an essay, a discussion. If you're doing group work, you can set up a separate rubric for that. You can have rubrics for portfolio submissions. Anything you want, you can create as many rubrics for your course as you want to. Even if you have a custom, super wonky assignment that is totally unique to everything else that you're doing, you can set up a custom rubric just for one assignment. It's up to you. I generally will set up a rubric that is fairly consistent for an assignment type. So if I have them turning in a couple of essays and they have to turn in a discussion every week, then I'll set up rubrics, standardized rubrics for that type of an assignment. Like I said, if I have an assignment like some big, capstone project or something that's totally unique, then I can make a separate rubric for it. But what I like to do is actually publish my rubrics in advance so that students have an opportunity to go in and look at, well, how is she going to grade me? What things are important to her that I need to do these things? These are the boxes I need to check. And with what level of quality is she expecting in order for me to get, the full points for an assignment? So rubrics can be set up based on a scoring system, or they can be set up with points.
Excuse
There's
me,
a couple of other, yes, sir.
Pardon the interruption. Can you go ahead and put that into full screen? We're getting some questions. If you can go ahead and put it into full screen and maybe just zoom in just a little bit so everybody can view it just a little more clearly. Let's see. Can we go ahead and check the chat here? Let's see here. Is everybody able to see that rubric? Let's see.
Yes, I can see
Okay.
it.
All right. Okay.
Hey.
Thank you, Jacqueline. And thank you,
Hugo.
guest.
And I apologize. Hugo is the master at zooming in and out. I have not mastered that yet. I'm going to have to talk to him later so he can teach me.
There's also the page zoom on the upper right if you want to try that. So if you go to the upper right, click on the 3 dots on your browser, upper right.
Okay, more.
Upper right corner of the screen. Not in Zoom, but on your web browser. So
The far right.
yeah, here, maybe I can annotate for you. So yeah, and then there's this right here. And you can go ahead and click on the Zoom option. So like go right there. And then you can click on this and then click right there to just enlarge the text just a little bit. That can help
better?
right there. Yeah, I think
Yep.
yeah, I think that looks good. And then you can always come back there to reset it later. So
Okay.
you go ahead and back
Thank
out.
you.
I will mute.
All right, so I'll give everyone a chance to kind of check out these pictures of rubrics that I developed. And I'll actually pause. Does anyone have any questions so far? And, take a minute. You can look over what I did. And if anyone is curious, like, well, why did you write it that way? Or what was your rationale? I'm happy to answer those type of questions too. Okay. So basically, when I think about my boilerplate instructions, and I'm going to show you an example of that in a moment, I think about, okay, I want to make sure they're turning it in on time. So for those of you that don't dock your students points for turning in an assignment late, you might not necessarily want to put in a block like this. If you do, if you're persnickety about it like I am, then I like to have a row in here saying, yeah, you turned it in on time, you get 10 points for that. If it was late, then I'm going to dock you 5 points or something. Depending on the type of class I'm teaching, it can really turn into a bit of a beast if I've got a lot of students dogpiling me with a bunch of late essays that I then have to spend, 15 hours straight pulling all-nighters to get it all graded before, my final grades have to be submitted. And that has a tendency to make me cranky. So I put in stuff in my rubrics to discourage that behavior. But some instructors don't mind. And so that's something, again, thinking about the rubric, like it doesn't really matter how you set it up. It's about, my main message today is it's about transparency. Here's what's important to me that you do, and I'm telling you in advance, and, full disclosure of why I want these things. Another thing is, like, when I have them do essays, I'll give them a specific number of paragraphs or pages that I want. And depending on the depth of the assignment, maybe it needs to be a 5-page paper, or if it's just a simple, quick research assignment, maybe 2 pages will suffice, or, but I like to be very, very objective in what I ask them. So I like to spell out, I want double space, I want, this many paragraphs. Each paragraph needs to be a minimum of 4 sentences. Don't type out 2 sentences and call it a paragraph. It just depends on the level of student that you're working with. When you're working with seniors, you probably won't have that problem as much as when you're working with freshmen. But just whatever it is that you expect, whatever that minimum is, try to be as objective as possible in your boilerplate instructions when you're setting up your rubric. So I will say, okay, did you meet the required length? Great. If you met the minimum number, but you didn't really flesh out your paragraphs, maybe I'll dock them a little. Or if they just didn't turn in as many paragraphs as I asked, then I take away all the points for it. You know, again, it's just thinking about what's that checklist you want to give them. If I want them to do references, I make sure that I tell them it needs to be properly, you know, formatted, and I tell them that if it's APA or MLA, whichever style guide that is necessary for the subject they're studying. But if I'm wanting them to do independent research, or if I'm wanting them to reference assigned materials, then I'll usually add a row for that. But hopefully you're kind of getting the point that you can, you know, you can create the rubric based on what it is that is important to you and that you expect of them. Now, with my discussion rubrics, I set them up a little bit differently. And this was just meant to be an example of how you can actually do weighted scoring. That's going to be the default in rubrics. So if you want to change it to a point system, I can show you how to do that. But it is an option, but it's going to default to this weighted scoring system. So, you know, what I like to say is, all right, I want them to make a well-formed argument for their initial post. Did they turn it in on time? Because that's really critical in order to facilitate a asynchronous discussion, a debate. If they're turning in their post late, then they're not going to have as much time for other students to respond to them, and then they're not going to have a chance to respond to the responses. So I want them to turn this stuff in on time so that they have that space throughout the week to actually get into a proper discussion and back and forth with each other. So that's why the way I set up my discussion rubric is so specific to, did you turn in your post on time? Did you respond to at least 2 classmates? Did you properly support your argument with references and resources? And did you engage in the discussion? Meaning, did you actually take the time and the energy to follow up to follow up? And so if I see a good deep thread going on all those posts, then I know that those students were really actually engaged in the discussion. So these are the kinds of things that I think about with each type of assignment that I'm creating a rubric for, is what is it that I want them to do? What is important to me? What is my ultimate objective of that assignment? And how can I set my rubric up so that they understand the criteria and actually get the most out of the assignment? And so, you know, yeah, I post all that stuff in advance and I encourage them to go look at it. I'll pause again while I'm moving on to the next piece and see if anyone has any questions.
Jacqueline, just out of curiosity, for your essay, is the clip that you showed everything that you included, or do you also include more items within your rubric?
That was everything that was in that rubric that I built.
Okay, thanks.
But you can put in as many rows as you want. Like if you want to have 6 or 7 different rows, you know, with like more granular criteria, you can absolutely do that. Especially if it's for something specific, where you have like kind of a, you know, a project with some of its own like unique criteria, you can put in as many rows as you want. Okay, thank you. Absolutely. Okay, so I referred a couple of times to boilerplate instructions. So this is what I mean by them. Every single time that I make an essay assignment, or a discussion assignment, either one, I put in boilerplate instructions. And the reason that you'll like this is that it makes it faster for you to build. Because when you write your discussion questions, really the first couple of paragraphs is you focusing on what is the resource that you want them to refer to prompt their thinking. And then you're going to ask them some kind of question that is going to encourage them to form an opinion that they're going to have to support. So you don't want to have to worry about writing this out over and over and over again. So that's why I like to create these boilerplate instructions. The other reason that it's important, aside from you setting up your rubric with this, is that you want to train your students that if you're going to have a discussion assignment every week, they need to just be used to it. You need to have a rhythm to your course so that they know, okay, it's Tuesday, I owe my discussion, you know, to Professor T, you know, and okay, I've got to log in and make sure that I get that done. And that means that you'll train them to start, you know, jumping into the class on like Sunday night, hopefully, you know, for the next week, and get their reading done by Monday and start working on their discussion post by Tuesday, and then get it turned in, excuse me. And you're going to set your due dates up in the system so that if those posts come in late, it's going to flag them as late, which also will help you with your grading workflow. But you just want the students to kind of know it's Tuesday, I owe a discussion post. It's Thursday, I need to respond to at least 2 classmates. It's Sunday, I need to go back in and check on whether or not anyone responded to what I said to my other classmates, or if anyone responded to me, you know, and I need to respond to them. So it's just that kind of continual engagement in the classroom, which will help with your retention rate, because the less engaged a student is in the class, the more likely they are to procrastinate, forget about it, and then once they realize that they're super behind, they get discouraged and they're more likely to drop. So it helps with a lot of different elements of managing your classroom, especially in an asynchronous class. So usually what I'll do is I'll put the due dates in bold, and then if I have any special things that I care about, like for me, I always want them to have, I want them to write in complete sentences, and I want them to have references to their required resources, and I encourage them to go out and do a little bit of their own research and do some independent, you know, looking around, and I encourage them to include references for that to get maximum credit for the assignment. Now, will I give them most of the credit if they kind of just have like one resource and, you know, they referred to the required resource? Yeah, I'll give them, you know, give them minimum credit for it. But for those, because I'm trying to encourage this behavior, I want to see them really take their initial post seriously as making a substantive comment to a conversation that I'm trying to start. I like to put qualitative instructions in here too. So you might want to think about that when you're setting up your boilerplate instructions. But once you get them set up, this is just a copy and paste situation. And you will be able to focus on writing out, you know, what you want them to focus on for that resource that you want to prompt their thinking on, and then what questions you want to ask them to encourage forming an opinion and engaging in a healthy debate for a discussion assignment. And then I do the same thing with my essays. This is where I'm a little more nitpicky, granular, objective. Hey, it's got to be this many paragraphs long. I want 2 outside references at a minimum to support your argument. And you have to properly format your references with inline citations and a bibliography. And I make sure I list the style manual too. So that way, students, they're not confused about, well, you didn't say what you wanted. Yes, I did. I posted both the rubrics that I'm going to be scoring you on, and I posted it on the assignment with boilerplate instructions. Like, it's always the same, that same format anyway. Now, if you have a more lengthy project, it doesn't have to be that every single essay has to be exactly the same, because it's not going to be. What I like to train them on is that they know where to look for the criteria that I'm going to be grading them on. And then you just need to make sure that if you changed anything like drastically, that you just create a custom rubric for that assignment when you attach it. So I'll pause there briefly before I go on to the next topic to see if anyone has any questions about the benefit of boilerplate instructions.
No questions in the chat.
Okay. So would you like me to show you how to set up a rubric, or would you like me to show you what it looks like to grade off of a rubric? I'll let you guys pick. You can vote in the chat room.
I'd like to see how to set it up, if you don't mind.
Yes, there was another question on that as well earlier, so go ahead and.
Okay, so we'll go into setup mode. Now, if you go under course tools, come on, buddy, there we go. If you go under course tools and you just scroll on down, you will find rubrics right here. and this is going to take you into your rubric area. You can create a rubric on the fly when you're like actually making an assignment, but for the purposes of this exercise, I kind of encourage faculty, go ahead and create your standard rubrics for now. That way you can easily attach them as you are setting up your assignments throughout the semester. I know we'd all love to have our assignments done day one, but reality is we often have to build as we go. So I say put the time in, get the rubrics out of the way, and then if you need to create a custom rubric, you still can. So you just click create a rubric, and we'll give it a name. For example, let's say you're going to have some journal assignments. So I'll say journal assignment at rubric. You can give it a description if you want, but it's not necessary. Okay, so here is just going to be your standard default Blackboard rubric. If you're fine with the way it looks, you really do just want to grade them on formatting and how the essay was organized and what the grammar, you know, if they did an okay job on grammar, you're done. You can literally just click submit. But if you want to use the rubric in a more like detailed way, the way that you can change all of these columns as well as how you score them, it's all in here. It's all available to you. So let's just say you want to use an approach similar to how I did it. You want to ask questions. Well, if we're doing a journal assignment, was the response thoughtful? So that's all you need to do. You just use these little chevrons and click edit. At the minimum length. Proper grammar. So that's just my style of writing rubrics. Everybody's different. I like to think about it as did they answer the question or not, or did they check off the box or not. So you can leave these as novice, competent, proficient if you like, but for some rubrics, I find that this system doesn't quite work. If you say, well, I just want to say yes or no, like especially for a journal where you might be saying, well, this is their space. I just want to see that they're doing the work. You can delete a column and then you could just go into edit and say yes, no. You are really not cooperating today. There we go. You could just say yes or no. If it's yes, then they get 100%. If the answer is no, they get 0. Actually, I think I need to do it like that. So you really have a lot of flexibility with how you want to use the rubric. If you just want to score it, just like, okay, did they actually put some thought into the response? Yeah, they did. Great, they get credit for that particular part. Or no, I could tell that they just kind of, you know, didn't really think about it, just wrote whatever. They weren't giving me the reflection that I was hoping for. If they didn't really write very much, you can say, no, you really didn't meet the minimum length. And if they didn't even bother to spell check and have proper, you know, at least some basic grammar, maybe I'll take away a third of their grade for that. You can customize the weight. So for example, if you feel like the amount of thought that they put into their response is more important, you can say, well, 50% of your grade goes to that. Meeting the minimum length, maybe that's not as big of a deal. Or you could say, well, all right, I'm going to give them 35% of their grade for at least writing the length I want. And then, of course, I had to make myself do math. I think it's 15%. Yeah, it just has to equal 100%. So if grammar is not as big of a deal, you could say, well, okay, it's just a journal anyway. And really what I care about is that they're putting the thought into the assignment, that they're actually generating, their own independent thinking. However you want to balance out the grade, that's totally up to you. That's just how you actually set it up. Just please make sure that your total weight equals 100%. And if you're terrible at math and you try to kind of roughly get it, to where you want it, but it's telling you it's not equaling 100, you can just click this button that says balance weights and it'll just reformulate it for you so that the weights they will equal 100. But if you want something really custom, you're going to have to bust out your trusty calculator. So from there, after I'm happy with my weights and my scoring, this is where you have an opportunity to add in some feedback. So you could say something to the effect of the journal entry lacked sufficient reflection and originality of thought, if that's what you're looking for. Oops, sorry, that should be on the 0. This entry was well thought out and reflective of the topic. Something like that. Just explain to them why you're giving them the point or why you're not giving them the point. Met minimum required length. And since copy paste is my best friend when I'm setting up tedious stuff like this, did not meet minimum required length. So I think you guys get the point. Once I'm done, I'll just click submit. And now I have created my journal assignment rubric. If I want to create an assignment now, I'm going to go into, for a journal assignment, you go into tools. Okay. I'm going to select the journal that I want to establish this assignment for. And then from there, I'll click submit. That's going to create the link to the journal. But then I'm actually going to have to go into the journal and edit it. So then you'll go into that journal that you created. Sorry about that, guys. I clicked on the wrong thing. I want this drop-down box. I'm going to go to edit. And this is what I was saying, even if you've created some assignments, don't worry about it. You can still attach rubrics. All you have to do is go in and edit it. And then I'm going to click add rubric. I'm going to select my rubric, journal assignment, click submit. I always like to have due dates on everything. So if I want it due by, the 25th at midnight. Oh, you always fuss at me about that. Fine, 11:30. And the other thing is I like to show the rubric with scores. Some faculty like to say, yeah, I don't care if they see the rubric, as far as the criteria, but I don't want them to see what the scoring will be. Or you can choose to show the rubric to the students after grading. I don't like to go this route because the whole point of the rubrics in terms of improving my relationship with my students and transparency in my grading, that defeats the purpose. So I always say, yes, you can see the rubric with the scores. And then just click submit. And now a rubric has been attached to this journal assignment. So I'll pause to see if anyone has any questions with regards to either setting up a rubric or how you attach it to an assignment.
Hey, Jacqueline. So I see there was a ticket, I mean, a question earlier. So the question was, can you show us how to program the calculation function percentage versus points? So my guess is, just to get clarification on that question there, I think she wants to see how it looks like with points as opposed to percentage. So
Okay.
Leanne, don't know if that's what you were asking there. If not, feel free to unmute, or you can go ahead and clarify in the chat.
Feel free to unmute yourself if you just want to ask a question. But I just went back to my 2 examples. This rubric is what it looks like if you do points instead of a percentage.
Yeah, she just replied. Yeah, she has essays that are at 150 points total. So a perfect score would be 150 points. Yeah, can you go ahead and edit that just so she can see the text fields for the for that specific rubric?
I can absolutely do that. So here's my rubric. Okay. All right. I will make another rubric. I'll just call it test. So basically, you're going to first start by saying points. And let's say that in order to be proficient, you've got to get 50 points out of every category. And if you're confident, maybe we'll give them 25 points, which ought to get them to about a C. And if they're novice, maybe you give them 15 points, which, if I bust out my trusty calculator, $45 points divided by 150. That gets them to a 30%, which would give them an F, if that's what you want to give them. I mean, and again, it's not that they're going to necessarily get, not that they're necessarily going to get novice in every category, because I mean, I suppose they could, but if it's that bad, you're going to need to have an external conversation with them anyway. That's a phone call. That's a, hey, what happened? How can I support you? But you know, if you set it up like this, then when you grade, you basically can just choose whichever, you know, you'll tick off whichever area you feel they fall into on these categories. So I'll pause there. Leanne, did I answer your question in terms of how to set that up?
Yes.
Okay, great. So that kind of brings me to my next topic. Do we have any additional follow-up questions in terms of setup and connecting it to assignments, or would you like me to move over to grading workflow and show you what that looks like? You can either weigh in on the chat or you can open up your mic.
I think there was another question. If you can just demonstrate very quickly how to add a column in that rubric, or how to add a row.
Absolutely. Okay, so it's actually very easy to delete and add rows. If you want to add a row, you're just going to click this button here, and it'll pop a row down here for you. And then you use this little chevron, click edit, and then you can give it a name. Whatever, however, you guys kind of saw how I kind of was like phrasing my rows in terms of questions, but you know, that's how you give it a name. And then you just set up whatever the weight is that you want. You can balance the weights. Usually if you start, like the more you add rows, it's gonna just keep breaking down the percentage smaller and smaller. So if you have a really specific way that you want to set that rubric up, I would recommend that you kind of like use your trusty calculator and scratch out like, well, these are the columns I want, and then just like note what percentages you want and make sure they equal 100, so that when you're going through and entering all this, you don't get stuck with Blackboard being mad at you because you're not equaling 100. So I try to do my math first, and I try to plan out what my rubric's going to be before I start entering all of this stuff, because it can get kind of time consuming. And then if you want to add a column, you would click add column. And kind of the same thing. You just use the chevron, click edit, and then, you know, this is where you're going to put whatever your criteria level is. And you, like I showed you how I went yes, no, but depending on the class I'm teaching, sometimes I'll be, you know, a little bit silly, like with the way that I title my columns. I'll be like, awesome, or okay, you know, and the students kind of get a kick out of it. So it's just really up to you how you want to name all this stuff. But the rubric can take on your personality if you want it to, or you could keep it very formal. Or you can set it up so that it just reflects the question you're trying to answer. That's kind of one of my favorite things about Blackboard, is that it gives you a lot of flexibility about, you know, how you want to communicate with the students, because even though we use this to grade, it is still a communication tool. So that's how you add rows and columns. And then if you change your mind, same thing, you just click on the chevron and say delete the column, and it goes away. Any other questions on setting up a rubric before I exit out of the screen?
At this time, I don't see any other questions in the chat. Well, let's see here. Wait, one just popped up. Why build the rubric through the course tools on the bottom instead of through the course content? I can take care of that one unless you want to answer that one. I think this is just more of a workflow for building the rubric. So it's like if you want to create a rubric from scratch, you want to go to course tools and rubrics. So then you have your tool to basically create the rubric from scratch. So it's kind of like when you're building a test in Blackboard, you want to go to course tools, test surveys and pools. So then you can go to that designated tool to create your test.
Yeah, if you're happier setting up a new rubric for every single assignment, or if you're happier just creating your first assignment and then building your rubric right on the spot, and then you're going to use it again and again, that's totally fine. You don't need to go to tools and then into the rubrics menu. I usually just like to think through how am I going to evaluate my students on a particular type of assignment, and then set the rubrics up and just have it done, so that when I'm actually building out my content modules, then it's like that's done. That back end stuff is done, and I can just go in and link stuff that, you know, as I'm writing my assignments and stuff like that. So it's really just how you like to build. I like to be prepared and just kind of get that back end stuff finished, because these rubrics take quite a lot of time and thought to write them out. And then once you start really building out the content areas of your course, the last thing I want to do is be like, oh my God, now I have to go now I have to go write another rubric. I just want it out of the way. And then if there's some one-off rubric that is going to be unique to just one assignment, then I might just build that while I'm building the assignment in Blackboard at the same time. So it's just personal preference. That's my preference, is I just like getting this stuff out of the way. And I like having my rubrics to be as simplified and uniform based on assignment type as possible, so that I can just keep reusing the same rubric, because otherwise I'm going to have to keep going back up and posting the course rubrics, because I want to make sure I publish all my rubrics to my students in advance, so that they know how they're going to be evaluated on every single assignment. So hopefully that makes sense. And, you know, but again, how you want to work in Blackboard is totally up to you. I just like to give you guys as many time-saving tips as possible.
I think there were two more questions in here. Let's see here. When I filled in a rubric in content, I couldn't save it. Do I have to go back? Do I have to go to the rubric tool to reuse it?
If you created the rubric and clicked submit, then it should be in your rubrics menu now. So every time you set up a new assignment in one of your content areas, you should just be able to link the rubric to each assignment that you want to use it for. But if for any of you, if you're struggling with the tool and you just want to put a half an hour on my calendar, I'm happy to meet with you guys individually just to help you work out the kinks. So if you're kind of playing around with the tool while I'm talking and you're finding, you just have some kind of granular questions about why isn't this working, or how do I do this or that, I'm happy to meet with you guys individually and like work through building a rubric with you. And Hugo, you said you had a second question?
Yeah, it looks like there was another question here. In addition, can you copy this rubric to another class?
That's an excellent question. We'll have to figure that one out, Hugo, because I don't know it.
Yeah, I'm going to say yes if it's a course copy. Yeah, so if you copy the course into another course, you should be able to copy it. And then if you're in the rubrics tool, there should also be an export option. And that should also allow you to export it. It's kind of like if you want to export one test, like a single test, and import it into another course. Yeah, there it is. There's the import and export option. So if you have, so if you have one specific rubric, you just want to copy it over to another one, you can use this import export option. If let's say you build all of your rubrics in this course, you're really happy with using this and you want to use it for spring 2021, when you do the course copy, this should this can come along with it.
Okay. So I know that we're getting short on time. Let me show you quickly what it looks like to grade using a rubric. And let me pop into my grade center, close that. Okay, so when you go into your needs grading area, you'll find your assignments and you'll just click on this and say grade all users. And so we'll kind of work through this together. I have over here the option to give my students a grade, just full points if I think they got the full points. The only reason I bring that up is because sometimes faculty say, well, do I have to use the rubric every time? No, it's an option. Once you've attached a rubric, you click on your discussion rubric and it's going to expand it. Okay, so if I do show feedback and show descriptions, the descriptions is going to tell me what I had established as what was necessary to get full credit for each section. Okay, so the first question is, was this initial post on time? Well, it was due on Thursday and the student submitted it, on the Friday before. So not only was it on time, but it was early. So I would click it, well done. Second was, did they respond to at least 2 classmates? Now for this, when students start to reply to each other, you're actually gonna see all of the threads that are attached to this discussion assignment. So you're not gonna necessarily wanna grade a discussion assignment until you have completed the entire grading period. So if you're saying, well, I want you to have a couple of responses, people responding to you, you should be able to see them, unless I'm mistaken. Blackboard might have changed some things since I was working for them, but I believe that everything that's connected to that discussion assignment should show up. But I might say, well, okay, you didn't respond to everybody. So I would mark that as incomplete. Was it properly supported? Okay, here's my criteria for that. I'm asking them to have at least 2 outside references for their post. Well, I'm looking at this and, you know, okay, they kind of started to make an argument, and then they posted 1 link. I asked them for 2 references. I only got 1. So I would say that needs work. And then for feedback, I'd say you only listed 1 reference. 2 were required for full credit. And then the next thing that I asked about was, you know, are you engaging in discussion? So am I seeing that they are actually responding to people that are talking to them, and that they're actually trying to deepen and broaden and engage in the argument that they were trying to make? If I really didn't see that they did that, if all I see is just, you just made an initial post with 1 resource and you didn't really respond to your classmates, and you didn't bother responding to the classmates that responded to you, I would say incomplete, you know, because, and I already kind of made my comment here, there was no follow-up to your classmates. So you didn't really engage that much in this assignment. So it's going to give you a raw total. And it based on the rubric, the student only earned 3.75 out of 10 points. Now, you can still override that. Let's say in the area that they did well done, I could say, that's great that you were proactive and turned your work in early. Okay, so that's something that I would applaud them for. So maybe I want to give them a little extra credit because they turned in their work so early, even if it was a little meh. Still, they did something beneficial to the class. So I may choose to say, I'm going to give you 5 out of 10. And then if I want, I can say, you know, your post needs work on references and more robust writing, but you helped the class by turning in your work early. And then I would save it. And now it's done the scoring. It took in the extra credit that I wanted to award them. And I can even go further than that, and I can even add in some notes here if I want to give them more global feedback. Please review your rubric for detailed feedback, you know, and then I would click submit. And now that's done. So you were able to go in, and this is the reason why I bring up rubrics as a way to improve conversation and relationships with your students, is that you can establish the criteria in advance. You can be very transparent about what you expect from them. And through your boilerplate instructions, you're giving them a heads up from the very beginning. This is what I want from you. If you have any questions about how you're going to be graded, you can go to your rubrics and you can see them all here for you. This is what I want. And, you know, don't say you didn't know what I wanted from you for this assignment, but I don't say that to be like adversarial. It's more, I don't like arguing with students too much about their grades, because I want them focusing on the content. I want them focusing on what behaviors I'm looking for and what I want them to ultimately learn and take away from the assignments, not, you know, arguing with me about, well, I don't understand why you gave me this grade and you're not being fair and that kind of stuff. So when you use this method, it circumvents a lot of those conversations. And I've found that I've been able to have much more productive and proactive conversations with students about their work, and we get to focus on what they're there to learn versus feeling persecuted because they think that they didn't get the grade they deserved. When I was very clear, you know, down to the letter, this is what I want from you if you want to get full credit on these assignments. And, you know, I feel like even if they didn't end up getting quite the grade they were hoping for, they didn't walk away from the experience feeling like, you know, I slighted them or they didn't understand, or, you know, just those kind of negative feelings that sometimes we get when we don't get a grade that we felt was fair. So that's really one of the main points of this workshop for me anyway, why I wanted to run it, was the way that we grade is very emotional to students, and we want to make sure that we are having productive and positive engagements with our students. And this is one of those key areas that we can set up these tools and be very transparent in what we expect, so that they know, even if they ended up not quite getting the grade that they wanted, at least they didn't feel like they were confused about why they got the grade that they did. So I know I've said a lot, I've covered a lot. I will pause there and see if anybody has any more questions before we wrap up.
I have a quick question. Did you say that this is going to be posted? The recording will be posted? Thank you.
I believe Hugo sends it out in an
Yeah.
email to anyone who attended.
Yeah, so if you signed up and you're on that, if you signed up for this session, we will be sending out the replay later.
Thank you.
And I will bounce back over to my contact information. Of course, Hugo, you asked me to make my screen full, and so now my panel keeps popping up. Now I can't figure out how to get out of it.
Let's see here. You might, let's see if you can detach that. Yeah, I think he did go into full screen. It's on the upper.
Yeah, every time I try to go
I'll
over
just
there,
hover all the way to the top, so then that toolbar appears.
There we
you are.
go.
There you go.
Okay. Oh, one other thing that I like to point out as like just a best practice is if you set up like a little notepad or a Word document, when you're establishing your rubrics, what I like to do is put my boilerplate instructions, you know, for each assignment. I just like to put it off in the corner so that when I'm writing my rubrics, I know exactly what I'm asking them to do in their assignment instructions, so that I can make sure that my rubric mirrors exactly what I'm asking them for. But beyond that, let me bring my contact information up again, or maybe you guys could put it in the chat. I don't know why there we go. Cranky programming. Okay.
Yeah, your email was posted in the chat.
Yes. Okay. Any last minute questions, my friends?
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you very much. This was great.
Thanks,
Oh, my
Jacqueline. That was
pleasure.
awesome.
Very helpful. Thank you.
My pleasure. And like I said, if you need any help setting up rubrics, or just want to talk through your independent, you know, use case, and you just have some questions about like, well, how would I even do this? I'm happy to take a meeting. So you just shoot me an email. And have a great rest of your Friday.
Thanks.
You too. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.